Welcome to our Python series. We have completed the C++ series. And in the C++ series, we went through the basics of programming in terms of how to do input and output. What are the control structures like the if structures and the looping structures like the for and the while. We have also gone through creating variables and how do we create and consume function. What we're now going to do, therefore, is to transfer that knowledge into Python. The syntax will be different, however, the basic concepts as to how the programming elements operate are going to be the same. We're using Online GDB as our platform for our demonstration. So let's go ahead and change the language from C++ to Python. And the first thing that we're looking at here is the print statement. So it's the print keyword followed by our parentheses. And inside the parentheses, we're going to have the string that we want to print on the screen. Python uses two symbols for strings. It can be single quotes or it can be double quotes. I, for one, prefer to use double quotes because that is consistent with the C++ language that you have learned so far. We're now going to execute, and we can see in the output window that we have displayed the hello world. So that's it for the print operation in a nutshell. We will revisit this operation in a little bit. Another thing that is important if we're going to be comparing both programs is the concept of a main program. In C++, we would have the main construct. You already know how that looks in terms of main, the parentheses, the begin and end. But in Python, it is treated a little bit differently. So the syntax is going to look different. So we're going to put two underscores. We're going to put the keyword name, two more underscores, double equal sign. We're going to have a string, and inside the string, we're going to put underscore, underscore, main, underscore, underscore. And what we're now going to do is we're going to now type a print statement here. My name is Formatt. And we are going to execute and see what happens. And when we look in the output window, we realize that the string that we have just typed has actually appeared, which means that we have effectively set up the main program or the main construct. Now remember, the purpose of the main is for us to put the instructions that we want to execute. So inside this main, I'm going to create some variables, and in Python, creating a variable does not require a data type or an explicit data type. What obtains is that once we create the variable and we store a value inside the variable, then the data type is going to be inferred from that. For example, we have num1 is equal to 5. And let's say we have fname is equal to Sandy. And we are now going to use the print operation. And we did say that we are going to revisit this operation. So print. Let's go back with Sandy, print. And let's say we don't want to display Sandy or the content of the variable. So we do the double quote. And then we put the name of the variable inside the open and close brace. So this is the begin and the end in C++. We're using the same sort of construct here, but it just have a slightly different meaning. Let's re-execute. And now I want you to notice that what we have here is that we have printed exactly what we have placed into the double quotes. We have not actually printed the content of the variable. And in order to do that, we need to use what we call a formatted string. So I'm going to place an F right before the double quotes. We're going to re-execute. And now you can see that we are getting the actual content of the variable. And this is why I had indicated that we would revisit the print statement. So now we have seen that we can use the concept of a formatted string to get the content of the variable by placing the variable between the begin and the end. Now, if I wanted to have a sentence like my name is followed by the name of the variable, then we can simply go into the double quotes and make the adjustment. So my name is followed by the variable that we are printing, and I'm going to execute. Now notice it says my name is, and we are seeing Sandy. Once again, it is important that we are working with a formatted string, so please put the F there, because if I remove the F, and have a look at what we get. My name is, and it does not print the content of the variable. So I would suggest moving forward, you just use a formatted string to simplify matters. So I want to say my name is Sandy and my age is followed by whatever is in num1. So we put num1 there in the begin and end so that we can now display num1 as a variable or the content of the num1 variable. And we re-execute. My name is Sandy and my age is 5. Let's also say that we want to do an addition. So let's say that sum is equal to 10 plus num1. And then we want to print the sum is followed by the sum variable. Once again, we execute and we see what happens. So we can ignore the first line about Sandy. We realize that there's an error here because we should have had the. And we also realize that we are printing the string sum, whereas we want the value of the variable. So once again, we're going to put the F so that we have a formatted string. And there we can see that the sum is 15. So num1 had 5, and we're adding 10 to that. So we end up with the sum being 15. Now remember what I said earlier about the fact that once we store the data in the variable, then the data type is inferred. So because this was a numeric value, meaning it was not placed in any double quotes, so it's not being seen as a string value, then it means that Python is going to view this as being a numeric value. And that's why we were able to add 10 to the number 5 and end up with the sum being 15. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to put the 5 in double quotes, and we're going to re-execute. And what we're seeing here is that we're now ending up with an error. And the error here is that we cannot add an integer and a string value. So if I also go up to the 10 and represent it as a string value, and we execute, then note that it's now saying that the sum is 105. How did it end up with 105? Well, what we had a while ago is we had a string 1, 0, and we add to that the string 5. So we ended up with a string called 105. Now note, this is a string value, and as such, we could not do any mathematical computations with this. So while we're seeing it on the screen as if it is 105, the number, it is actually 105, the string. And as such, we cannot do any mathematical computations with it. So these are some things that you need to be aware of as you navigate the space and work with these variables. Another thing that might be important for you is how do we accept input? And there's a keyword here called input. Let's say enter name. So we want them to enter name. And let's say we're going to store that into the variable fname. So fname is equal to input, enter name. And after that, let's do a print statement. We know it's going to be a formatted string. My name is, followed by the fname variable in the syntax specified, which is the begin and the end. We're going to close the double quotes. And we're now going to execute this command and see what happens. So we execute, and notice in the output window, it now says enter name. And it's blinking, which means that we are now awaiting the input. So let's say that the name is Bob, and we hit enter now after typing Bob. We're now seeing the message, my name is Bob. So what has just happened is that we have used the input command to actually accept data from the user. And when the user enters that data, they place it inside this variable called fname. Now, one thing that we need to bear in mind is that the input returns a string value. It might be apparent, seeing that we're dealing with fname, that that's a string value, but let's change it slightly. Let's say we want to enter a number. Let's say that we're putting that number inside a variable called num1. And let us print out that variable first. So let's say num1, and let's just say number is. The number is num1. We're going to execute. It says enter number. We enter the number 12, for example. We hit enter. It says number is 12. But remember, I had indicated that what input does is that it accepts a value from the user and it returns that value as a string, which means in this case, the string that is being returned is the string 12. Now, if we are returning a string 12, it means that we are now not going to be able to perform any mathematical calculations on this. So we're going to try that. So sum is equal to num1 plus 10. And after that, let's say print. And let's say we're printing sum. So we're going to try this and see what happens. So we execute. It says enter number. We enter 12 again. Now notice we are getting a similar error where it's telling us that we cannot add a string value to a numeric value. So it says int here, it says string here. So we cannot add them together. And this just demonstrates that the value that we have obtained into num1 is actually a string value and not a numeric value. There's a simple fix though. We can use the val command to convert from a string, let me call it a string number, to an actual number. In other words, we want to convert from 12, which is in a string, into 12, which is a numeric. So we're using the val command to achieve that. So let's re-execute, enter number 12. It says here that number is 12, and it's not finding the val command. So I might have made an error. So let me go and check quickly. So Python convert int to string or string to int. It might be the int command instead of the val command. All right, right here I'm seeing it says int. So let me go back. Let's say int. Let's run 12. All right, there we go. So it was the int command and not the val command. So the int command converts from a string number, into its numeric equivalent. So we have taken care of input and output. We have taken care of creating variables and making use of them. We have taken care of setting up the main. So the other thing that we want to look at quickly is how do we go about setting up a function. Now, the thing that you need to bear in mind about Python is that it is very specific when it comes to spacing. And I will demonstrate what I mean when I create the function. Now, in creating a function, we use the keyword def, followed by the function name. Let's say we want to add. And then we enter the parameters, which are critical. So let's say we're adding A and B. So those are the parameters. And the function needs to have a colon at the end. Now I'm going to hit enter, and notice the next line is now indented. This is super important. When we are writing functions, body of the function has to be indented. And note I say indent and not space. So I don't want you to put one space or two space. I actually want you at the beginning of the line to press the tab key. And the tab key will give you the amount of spaces that you need. It's very important because if you misalign the spaces in other compilers, then it's not going to work. So please bear that in mind. Super important. So we press the tab, and now we want to indicate what this function is going to do. And I'm going to say this function is going to add A and B. So A plus B. And then on the other line, we tab again, and let's say return sum. So we have created a function called add. This function takes in two inputs, two parameters, A and B. We're going to add them together, put them into sum, and then we are going to return sum as an output. So I can get rid of everything that is here. And now I'm going to make use of this function within the main. So let's say that the answer is equal to add. And what do I want to add? Let's say 10 and 6. And then I want to print the answer. So print formatted string. The answer is followed by the variable, which is answer. And then we need to close the double quotes. And let's now execute. We're seeing that the answer is 16. And on line 17, what have we done? We have called the add function. And we have called the add function with the parameters 10 and 6, which means 10 is going to go into A and 6 is going to go into B. Then we are going to add those two values, 10 plus 6. That gives us 16. We store the 16 inside the variable sum. And then we return the value of sum as the output of the add function. So when this add function computes, 16 is going to be returned, and that 16 is going to be assigned to the variable answer. And then we are simply printing out the content of that variable, which gives us the value 16. So we have effectively created our function, and we have also consumed the function or made use of the function. We'll stop here for this session into Python. And in our next session, we'll have a look at the various control structures. And then after that, we will start having a look at classes and how to set them up.